Hello, everybody. Welcome to part 2 of the end of the year discussion for 2020. That's right. We rambled on so long in the last episode that we decided to split this into a second one as we continue our chat talking about games of the years and what will hopefully end up being what we consider the game of the decade. There's been a lot of stuff going on within the last 10 years. We're on our third console generation. Nintendo, of course, did its we're going to succeed more than any company with the Wii, and then immediately flounder with the Wii U, where we all thought they were going away, and the endless conversations of Nintendo's going to be software only persisted for a number of years until the Switch came out. And of course, the recent release of the PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series S and X, of which no one can get, except for scalpers with bots. So congrats. So let's take a trip down memory lane, as there's a lot of platforms to explore and some generation gaps that we'll get to in the midst there. We're going to go all the way back to the ripe old year of 2010. Just imagine where you guys were in 2010. I don't even think I want to think about it. So I pulled some notables from two major outlets, and then it just made sense. You know what? If we're going to be talking about games of the decade, we should probably include more media outlets. So let's look at the overall review scores aggregate-wise for those years. And so, you know, we're pulling some things off Metacritic here, and we'll talk about some of the Game of the Year award winners once we get to their creation in 2014. But going back to 2010. And how rude of me! I'm here with Joe and Kevin. I just totally glossed over the fact that you guys are here with me, of course. So we're going back to 2010. Top 10 games of that year. Do you guys have any guesses for number one?
What came out that year? Let me check. I think, based on what we have on our little lists, it's Super Mario Galaxy 2. Is probably up there.
You're correct. Yeah, Super Mario Galaxy 2 was the highest reviewed game that year in 2010 on Metacritic at a 97, which is pretty impressive. Number 2, Mass Effect, followed by Mass Effect 2. I apologize. Mass Effect 2, Red Dead Redemption, Pac-Man Championship Edition DX, StarCraft 2, Wings of Liberty, Rock Band 3, God of War 3, Super Street Fighter 4. Rounded out by MLB 10 The Show, and then an honorable mention there would be Halo Reach. So our objective for this and for every year moving forward is to see if we can land collectively on what we think out of those 10 games should be representative of the year that we're currently in. So Kevin, of those listed, what would you think is the best game to represent 2010?
Oh gosh, represent it how?
As the pinnacle of gaming for that year.
I want to say Super Mario Galaxy 2 because I played that game and I'm also a little biased, but for another reason, I want to say Red Dead Redemption because that was, I just remember that was a huge game for that time, wasn't it?
It certainly was. And if I'm throwing my 2 cents into that one as well, I would also pick Red Dead Redemption, which is going to give Joe a small uphill battle here. Red Dead Redemption did a lot open world-wise at the time. It did a lot narratively at the time. It was a game like where you thought you were done, and then it turns out, nope, there's more story left to go. And it really made this very realized, living, breathing world. Where there just seemed to be a lot of organic things that you would stumble across. So that's got my vote. So Joe, give us your insight out of that list. What do you think?
I mean, if we're talking the most representative game of that year, then, you know, not talking what my favorite or most enjoyed game is, but most representative of the year, I would probably have to go with Mass Effect 2. I feel like Minecraft didn't really get big in the first year that it came out. It took a little bit of time to really gain its footing. But Mass Effect 2 was just everywhere. It was a shooter. You know, it had its RPG elements, and it was a game that, you know, was building on top of a game that was already popular. You know, Halo Reach was a really big and a really popular game, but it wasn't nearly as big as the other Halo games. It was a lot of people started to call that like a decline in Halo games. But Mass Effect 2 was, to me, very representative of that year, or at least for me and the things that I remember seeing. Even Mario Galaxy, I don't feel like ended up being as popular and as talked about as the original Mario Galaxy.
All right, so let me see if I can sell you on this, because let's my reasoning or rationale. I know there's going to be a big asterisk here. All right, Mario Galaxy 2 vastly improved upon the original. Arguably, Mass Effect 2 vastly improved on the original. Here's the asterisk. Red Dead Redemption is technically a sequel to a game called Red Dead Revolver, which came out on the PlayStation 2 that a lot of people don't even know about or never played. So in that regard, I might put Red Dead Redemption 2 only above because it brought people into that game. I don't think there was anyone that was like, man, I can't wait for this game because I love Red Dead Revolver, right? It was kind of like, Rockstar, why are you making a sequel to this game that no one played? Well, they proved why. And that game was tremendously successful, which is the only reason why I might notch it above Mass Effect 2. Would that be enough to convince you that maybe Mass Effect is a close second?
I mean, what you're fighting against for me is really just what I remember being more popular. And Red Dead was a really big game. It was just in the same way as Minecraft. I don't remember it being as big with its initial release. And as soon as it came out, it was something that, like, a year, 2 years, 3 years on, people were like, I really love this game. When are they ever going to give us Red Dead 2? This game was really important. But to me, I don't remember hearing about it and don't remember it being as big at launch and when it first came out, as opposed to Mass Effect 2, which had people clamoring for it and waiting for it to come out in a way that Red Dead didn't have, because just like you said, people didn't really care about the prequel to that, as opposed to Mass Effect, the original one, which was also highly popular and well received.
Okay, and that's a good point. I think for me, that element of we weren't expecting this and it's amazing makes it more exciting or interesting than me than, okay, here's a highly sought after sequel that managed to live up to the expectations and or exceed those expectations for a lot of people. So here's what we'll do. I hate to do it for this round, Joe, but I think we're going to change our format a little bit here. Joe and I have pitched some pretty concrete ideas. Kevin, you're going to be our tiebreaker for this round. Unfortunately, I know your leanings, but
I'm with Joe, actually, because he made some good points to where it is a game for Mass Effect 2. It was a game, not to rehash his points, but like Mass Effect was hugely popular, well received, however you want to say it, and then Mass Effect 2 had that anticipation and hype behind it, and it did so well and delivered on so much. And Red Dead Redemption, while it was an incredible game, it was like pretty much an unknown quantity when it released, because they changed so much, right?
Fair enough. All right. So Mass Effect 2 is making the list. All right. For 2011, let's review these games. I'm going to run down the list. All right. Kevin and Joe are going to make their decisions, and then I will split the vote if we're not on agreement here. And then we'll rotate per year. So 2011, here's what we had to contend with. Batman, Arkham City, and The Elder Scrolls V, otherwise known as Skyrim, were the top two highest rated games of the year. All right, followed right after by Portal 2, The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time 3D, Minecraft, Legend of Zelda Skyward Sword, Uncharted 3, Drake's Deception. I'm going to skip the 2-pack here of Ico and Shadow of the Colossus as their remakes. Rayman Origins, and then finally Little Big Planet 2 and Forza Motorsport 4. So, Joseph, you heard the list. What would you pick as your game of the decade, or that year? Sorry.
The game of the year for me of that year is without a doubt going to be Portal 2. I can't get over the amount of time that I spent in that game. I know that we had talked about it earlier, the amount of times that I've played the game and fully knowing how to solve all the puzzles have gone back and played it again. The game's because it's more than just a puzzle game. You know, it's enjoyable. It's got a great narrative, a great story. It's one of the few times where a sequel comes out and is better than the original. They took everything that was in the original and really just made it a fully fleshed out game. It's fun from start to finish. There's really nothing about that game that I don't like. With the exception being that there were supposed to be features that still in the game, almost 10 years on, they say coming soon, and they just never put them out. But regardless of that, the game's a lot of fun. The aesthetic is really pleasing. The physics are intuitive. They make sense when you play them, so there's not a huge learning curve on it. As long as you don't have, vertigo or something like that, it's going to be a fun game for you to play. The humor is there. It's almost a perfect game to me.
Wow. All right. High praise. Kevin.
I want to add, I wish they would release Portal and Portal 2 on everything, because I want those two games on the Switch, because I played the original Portal and loved it, and I knew nothing about it when I played it. And then Portal 2 I got, but I never had the time to complete it, so I really want to play that game again. For me, my game of the year out of that list is gonna go to one of the Zelda games. And it's The Legend of Zelda Skyward Sword for a couple reasons. The story in that game, for somebody, me personally, Legend of Zelda is in my top 3 video game franchises. The story of that game was incredible, if you follow Zelda lore. The gameplay, what they tried with the motion controls, I respect what they tried to accomplish with that, even though it may have not been the best and a lot of people may not have liked it. I thought it was okay. But it was a huge Zelda game at the time, lots of anticipation, and I personally enjoyed the story a lot. And there's actually YouTube videos of people acting out the story, and it's all the clips of the story. And one day I want to go back and just rewatch that. And they may be re-releasing that game at some point in the future. There's rumblings, but that for me out of that list is my game of the year for 2011.
Interesting. Okay. So that makes my job harder, and we're going to mend our rules as we go here, because I would pick either of those. So if I had to split the vote between the two of you, and this works out nicely here, because I would have gone with Skyrim for my game of the year. I think there's a reason why that game has been ported basically to everything since that game has come out. It holds up well as far as a journey goes. It's a janky game. All right. It was when it came out, and it got marginally better over the years, and the mod community has done a lot there. But I think there's a reason why it kind of stands the test of time there. And if they ever do a full-blown remake of that, hold on to your horses. But if we're gonna play fair, I would still edge out Skyrim with Portal 2. If I had between the two of you, Skyward Sword was great. It's one of the best narratives in a Zelda game, as one of my favorite franchises as well. But I did feel it was a little long in the tooth. A lot of the dungeons were interesting to look at, but creatively very uninspired. And so that's also a game that, while locked to a system I really can't go back and play, I would absolutely play a remake. But I don't know if it edges out Portal 2 in terms of sheer, straight up fun entertainment and mind-bending puzzle solving satisfaction. So we're going to add Portal 2 for 2011, which, interestingly enough, all right, and the Game Awards came out in 2014. IGN, as a reference, their game of the year for 2010 was Mass Effect 2, and their game of the year for 2011 was Portal 2.
Joe.
Joe's batting 100 here.
Yeah, right.
IGN, I'm just saying, if you want my resume, let me know.
Yep. Okay, so here we go into 2012. Oof. Oh man, we're getting probably one of the only Vita games to top the list. Persona 4 Golden.
Wow.
One of the highest rated games that year, tied with Mass Effect 3. All right, followed by The Walking Dead, which was the Telltale game series. Their first season. I don't think they anticipated more, but it was very good. the indie game Journey, Xenoblade Chronicles, Dishonored, Borderlands 2,
We know what you're thinking.
Mark of the Ninja, Far Cry 3, Trials Evolution. All right. And then coming up in the ranks outside of some remakes is XCOM Enemy Unknown. All right. This is an interesting year as there's a lot of smaller titles followed with a lot of sequels. Joe, you are the Borderlands person, so I'm going to let you be the judge here as Kevin and I try and plead our case for what we think is the best game this year. Kevin, I want to start with you.
I don't think I played any of the games on that list, but Journey stands out because that game is pretty much an artistic masterpiece, if I'm not mistaken, and that is still a game I really do want to play. I don't know much about it, but I do remember like the visual style, and it looks very interesting. And like that was, correct me if I'm wrong, at the time, like that was a very huge indie game when it came out. But out of that list of games, like again, there's a lot of sequels. Not saying that that's ever a bad thing. A lot of them improved upon their original releases or whatever in the franchise. But Journey, like if I had to pick one out of that list, I would say Journey. And it's still, again, a game I wish got ported to everything so I can enjoy it on my console or device of choice. But Joe, what do you think is your game of 2012? I know what you're going to say.
Our judge, Kevin. So
judge.
he's so I get to go.
Oh, for Tom, yes, Tom. What is?
We'll hear Joe wax poetic about Borderlands in a second. Okay, so this is an interesting year for me because I didn't have a Vita, and I was so far behind in Mass Effect as far as just being on top. Like, I know that was an exciting conclusion to the trilogy. I know people were arguably pretty disappointed with the endings. So I'm gonna go a little outside the box here, and I just want you to take my choice with a grain of salt here. I'm going to go with Far Cry 3. Far Cry 3 was the perfection of the formula they had been working towards with the Far Cry series. And I feel that Far Cry 4 and 5 and all the kind of weird spin-offs in between then have been using the formula that they perfected with Far Cry 3. It had an interesting and engaging story. It was the first time, to my knowledge, where you can successfully traverse the map in interesting ways, get ambushed and attacked by animals that seem to kind of live and breathe in their own way, take over enemy encampments. It started the whole notion of, oh, you want to unlock this part of the map, climb the tower and those are all things that are still, like, those are mechanics still used in games today. So that was really new at the time, and it was exciting at the time, and it really kind of gave you a true sense of, all right, here's your objective. You can go about this a number of different ways, sneaking in with a bow and arrow and taking people out quietly, or if you just want to, like, you know, start chucking Molotovs in there, go for it. As that series progressed, I mean, I love Far Cry 5. I think that game's fantastic. But I think 3 was the one that really kicked it off with, you know, an interesting villain, good story, and then all the gameplay mechanics coming together. Judge us up, Joe.
I mean, do you want to, before I judge, do you want me to just go into my Borderlands rant?
Yes.
Okay. Are we timing him? Because he could go on forever about
I
Borderlands.
really could. No, I will keep my Borderlands rant short and simple, which is really that Borderlands 2 took what Borderlands 1, took most of what Borderlands 1 should have done and should have been, and put it into the actual game. You know, like there was a lot of quality of life fixes that should have been there. Borderlands 1 was very weak on the story. Borderlands 2 is very strong on the story. It kept the art style and turned it up. You know, the graphics look great. Handsome Jack is one of the greatest video game villains. He's funny. His motivation is clear. You know, he's not just the overarching bad guy who, like, you don't really see him or hear from him. He just sends his minions after you. I mean, that is what he does, but like, he is there with you for the entire game. and he's really interesting. And there's a couple points where you go, wait a minute, you're trying to kill me. Like he's a great, interesting villain that keeps you into the game. And it also, Borderlands 2 also really set up a lot of like looter shooters. It inspired things like Destiny to really make that kind of difference in the gaming industry. So I think it's a really, really important game that really was, just like Portal, it's almost perfect. It's got its flaws. It's got some pretty big ones. It can be very glitchy at times. But they did a lot for the game, and they really held on to adding DLC and adding great, interesting characters and voice lines and things like that. Honestly, my biggest disappointment when Borderlands 3 came out was that I will never be able to play as my Borderlands 2 character in a newer game anymore, and I think that's a bummer. That being said, if we're going to be between Journey and Far Cry, I don't know a whole lot about Journey. I didn't play it. I know the art style, and the art style is gorgeous. It's absolutely beautiful. It looks like a very interesting and somewhat innovative game. That being said, Far Cry, I agree with Tom. Far Cry it really set like that franchise up there. It really stopped the whole, Crisis being the top of their games to Far Cry being the top of their games. It's really interesting. There's a whole like living, breathing world within that game. The story is relatively interesting, and the game is just beautiful. The gameplay mechanics are really cool. I'm gonna have to go with Far Cry. It's just the game does a whole lot. It's really cool.
All right, Far Cry 3 on the list. For those in the know, Journey was IGN's Game of the Year 2000. So, all right, moving
into my resume.
2013. I guess it's time for Kevin to judge. This is an interesting list. Also interesting to note that our selections so far have been sequel, and trequel. So we'll see if that changes here. Number one, all right, on the list for games that came out in 2013. Oof. Grand Theft Auto 5, followed by The Last of Us, BioShock Infinite, Super Mario 3D World, Fire Emblem Awakening, Rayman Legends, Fez, which was an indie game, A Legend of Zelda, A Link Between Worlds, Flower, and Splunky. So, I know where I want to start.
Yeah. So start.
Hey, we'll just get it out there. This is actually surprisingly very tough. I'm glad to see this many Nintendo titles in there. Remember, at the time, Rayman Legends was a Wii U exclusive. I'm glad to see the 3DS get some love. Fire Emblem was the game that reinvigorated my love for that franchise after playing the original on the Game Boy Advance, because the original didn't come here until then. BioShock Infinite is gorgeous and fun and has some interesting political statements, even if it doesn't follow through in all of them. And Grand Theft Auto 5 is just Grand Theft Auto 5. That would be my runner-up if I had to choose. That game is great and it's fun, but really, The Last of Us, for me, again, was just like the apex of, at the time, storytelling in video games. It's a game I played through countless times, and it never fails to continue to hit those emotional highs, even when you know they're coming. And I think it's just that's a game where if you're digging a time capsule, it doesn't matter what year you're in. I think I'm throwing a copy of that in there for preservation. So my choice, Last of Us.
So this is a huge year.
Yeah.
Grand Theft Auto with The Last of Us, with BioShock, with Super Mario. There's so much going on this year. I mean, Rayman, I don't know if anybody actually cared about. I enjoy Rayman, but I don't know if anybody actually cared about that.
I hugely cared about that. I bought the
Really?
edition for the Switch.
Oh my god. Okay.
It's
All
really
right.
good.
I stand corrected then. I think very few people really cared about Rayman. But no, it really is a big year. I mean, I also played Spelunky and really was hoping that it would be enjoyable, but it wasn't. At least not to me. I've been berated for saying that. So, I mean,
This year too, so.
yeah, it's true, and I'm not interested in it. But I mean, I don't like the newer Grand Theft Auto games that much, but I think Grand Theft Auto 5 would be like the defining game of that year. I mean, that game is just kept rolling and rolling. There's very few people who haven't played that game. So I think that would be like the biggest game of the year. My personal one for that game of the year would be A Link Between Worlds. It's just a Zelda game, you know, like it's in a good way. It's a great game. It's a lot of fun. I really enjoyed playing through it. I mean, I played through it a couple years late. It's by no means my favorite Zelda game, but it was good to kind of return to a slightly different form than the full 3D Zeldas that we've been getting. It was very enjoyable. It was a fun game to play through with like a cool new mechanic, you know, to go between worlds. I liked it. I enjoyed it. That was my personal favorite for that year.
All right, Kevin. That was a surprise pick for me, in all honesty. So
Yeah, I was shocked you picked that, Joe, because out of that list, that is my number one game of that year. Tom, you're done. So, the Link Between Worlds, Joe, you meant like that whole going back to a older style of Zelda. Tom's so upset he left the video.
I'm the host.
Yes, it's glorious. So that game was just incredible. Like, as far as like the other Nintendo related releases on that list, like A Link Between Worlds, like I played so much of that game, and I really want them to do kind of like an HD remaster and like port it to something, because I would buy that again. And the Coco game in that is amazing. The soundtrack to the game is incredible. It was just a really, really good Zelda game. So tiebreaker, A Link Between Worlds definitely wins, because that's mine as well for that year.
all right.
What is Joe messing with?
Didn't realize my laptop is on its last couple minutes of battery here. Never got that warning.
So that takes us to
20.
wait, what year does that take us to? I'm confused.
We're in 2014 now.
Oh no, that was 2014. Did I skip 2013?
You, on your list, 2013 says the games that we just discussed.
Oh, I see. Okay, I was confused for a second, and here's why. Because the two highest rated games in 2014 are Grand Theft Auto 5, as it was remastered and ported to the PlayStation 4, and The Last of Us Remastered, which was a PlayStation port. So we're going to skip those. All right, so this is my turn to judge. Here we go. So I'm going to omit those two games from the top of the list, all right, which would then put, God damn it, I know where Kevin's going. Super Smash Brothers for the Wii U, Dark Souls 2, Bayonetta 2, Kentucky Route Zero Act 3. We're going to skip that one because that's part 3 of what a 5-act game came to be. Diablo 3 Ultimate Evil Edition, Velocity 2X, Shovel Knight, Dragon Age Inquisition, Mario Kart 8, and I'll end on this one, The Binding of Isaac Rebirth. I know that's not necessarily the top 10. There's a lot of duplicate copies for different platforms in there, so that's kind of a smattering of stuff.
Did you mention the first game that we have on our list? Shovel Knight?
I did not.
Because that was 2014, correct?
Yeah, it was. I guess I glossed over it for some reason. I apologize. I thought I mentioned it. If not, yeah, Shovel Knight's on there too.
All right. Am I going to start this one off?
Yes, because Joe's drinking a glass of water.
Okay. So, Tom, I want to ask you first, where do you think I'm going with this since you said that? I'm curious what you think I'm going to say.
I just figured you would have put Smash Brothers on there as your game of that year.
I am not, actually.
I always look for like, okay, but what's more indicative of video games as a whole in that time frame?
Right. Like, I love Smash Brothers, but I'm going to say Shovel Knight.
Ooh.
Because that game had a huge impact on indie games overall and just gaming in general. And as the years have gone on, there has been additions to that game, DLC, spin-offs. So like that game was a hugely popular 2D action platformer type game. So I would pick that out of that list. On that list, there's a lot of other games that I enjoy immensely, but I would say Shovel Knight, game of the year out of that list.
Yeah, so it looks like this is the time frame where we're probably on the cusp of some of the real big, like, next generation exclusives. So it seems like there's a lot of ports and stuff going on here. But Joe, where do you fall then on this list?
I'm gonna be honest. There weren't a lot of these games that I enjoyed on this list. I mean, like, there's Mario Kart, but I was, more of a fan of it now that it's on Switch. Bayonetta, I never really got into, and Bayonetta 2, if I remember correctly, wasn't quite as well received as the first one. I never played Binding of Isaac. Also, Dragon Age was really big, and I know that one was pretty popular, but I wasn't into the Dragon Age series anyway. But I believe one that's not from the list, I believe Titanfall came out that year, right?
Maybe.
I have Titanfall here. We're gonna double check.
Go for it. Yes, it did.
Yes, Titanfall. That's funny. It says Titanfall, and then it shows the screenshot for Titanfall 2, or the box art for Titanfall 2, which is also a great game. Titanfall's awesome. Pretty much all I can say. I know I'm not going to win this one, but Titanfall's a great game that it's just really well done. That's kind of all I can say. It's a shooter, but the parkour elements and stuff are fun. It's always fun to blast things in a mech. Compared to games like Smash Brothers that really were not as good as previous ones. Like that was a generation where it wasn't that good. In fact, the DS version of Smash Brothers was way better than the Wii version or the Wii U version.
I feel like that's but okay.
Whoa. Hold on. I need to know why you think that, because I played both. I'm very curious what you're going to say.
You know what? This could be biased based on the fact that I just ended up playing the DS version more, and when they released Cloud, I started playing as Cloud, and that made me feel like I was good at the game because I'm not good at Smash Bros. But when Cloud came, I I was good enough as Cloud that I could play online and actually win, and that's just, which is not 100% of the time, but I was winning like a good 80% of my battles. So on the other hand, nobody ever even wanted to play on Wii U. It was a Smash Brothers game. It wasn't horrendous or anything. It's kind of the same as the others. I know a lot of people had complaints about the leveling. I'm not a competitive player, so I don't really care. But I had more fun with the DS version than I did with the Wii U version.
I was going to say, the exclusive things between the two games, the 3DS had Smash Run, and the Wii U version had Smash Tour. Smash Tour was a pile of hot garbage, but Smash Run was actually really fun.
Mm-hmm.
So I played the Wii U version way more just because I like playing it on a TV, but the 3DS version definitely had some cooler exclusive features.
Nothing will beat Subspace Emissary, though. That's I liked it.
It was okay, but whatever.
It's a narratively driven element to a fighting game.
The cutscenes were cool.
Yeah, they were awesome, and they just all right, so wow, that's a pretty different ends of the spectrum here. So I think a lot of these titles kind of fall for me, with the exception of Smash Brothers, which was a flagship game for the Wii U. A lot of these games kind of feel, maybe Diablo. A lot of them feel like they're like second tier efforts and games, and nothing that you would say, "Oh my God, this is amazing." Even Dragon Age fell short of its ambitions in a really hard way. If you read the inside scoop on that game, development was not easy. And that was the game of the year from the Game Awards as they started in 2014, and IGN as well. So for me, I kind of agree. I'm going to lean with Kevin on this one and say Shovel Knight, as it was such a good homage to the NES games of days past, but with just enough modern sensibilities that it was really enjoyable to play. It's challenging as hell. And at least from my recollection, it was one of the earlier games to kind of revisit, that 18 or 8-bit, 16-bit style of retro game that now we see all over the place. So I'm going to go with Shovel Knight for
Shovel Knight it is.
my option or my selection. All right, so
You might as well skip 2015 because you already know what I'm going to say.
is why you're the judge.
15 has one of my.
Smart move.
Man, this all right. I'm gonna say this is a really tough year. There is a lot of good games here.
Yeah.
Maybe you shouldn't be the judge for this one, but
No,
we know what you're gonna pick. Okay.
Yeah.
So here's the list. Some fantastic titles, and of course, one of Joe's favorite is leading it off. Once we get past the PC port of Grand Theft Auto 5. And of course, if you've listened to our podcast in the past, you know one of Joe's favorites, released this year. All right, September 1st, 2015, was Metal Gear Solid 5, The Phantom Pain, The Witcher 3, Wild Hunt, Bloodborne, Undertale, The Legend of Zelda Majora's Mask 3D, Pillars of Eternity, Bastion, Super Mario Maker, Fallout 4. Oh, let's throw this one in there just to tease Kevin. Ori and the Blind Forest. That is a buttload of really great games. So, Kevin, I'll turn it over to you first.
If anybody has watched our podcasts, they may know what I'm going to say. A game that I have only played recently, but I would say Ori and the Blind Forest out of that list. And I'm very torn between that and Majora's Mask 3D. But Ori and the Blind Forest, just that game, when it was announced, I was bummed I didn't have the system to play it on. But when the Switch port got announced, like, you guys knew how hyped I was for it because I talked about it on the podcast like crazy. And like the art style, the music, the gameplay, like, I love that game. And I have the sequel downloaded on my Nintendo Switch that I need to play. And I also, this week, bought the
Of course you did.
releases as well because I'm crazy. And I may never open these. I might. I don't know.
Wait, can I borrow it then?
What?
Downloaded it. Could I borrow the new one?
We'll talk about that later.
That's a no.
My answer to that is usually no. Buy the game. Support the developers. That game, I know Joe has a different opinion, but like I love that game. It was amazing.
Then physically. Okay, this is a tough one for me, and I'm going to disappoint Joe because I'm not going to go with Metal Gear Solid 5. I'm sorry. I know. Yeah, you're going to talk about that.
He's gone.
Here's the thing. This list right now is filled with games that I played and I loved and never finished. Metal Gear Solid 5 being one of them. The Witcher being another one. Bloodborne being a third one. Undertale I actually did beat and was blown away by it. Bastion I never finished. Fallout 4 I never finished. Super Mario Maker, does that even have an end? I don't know.
It does now because it's being removed from the servers.
So there's a lot of great games here. For me, I think what brings the most to gaming and has kind of been a quiet model of how to do open world games in an interesting and unique way, and arguably hasn't actually been topped. I think they raised the bar. No one's been able to hit it. So my selection for this is The Witcher 3. What I really love about this game, even though I never finished it, part of the reason I never finished it is because there's so much shit to do that is really very interesting. Doing a side story that ends up taking like an hour and a half, 2 hours, not because it's long or boring and you want to get to the end and get the loot or get the reward for that quest, but because you're actually engaged in those smaller characters that you may never see again. I thought it was brilliant. it's a morose game. Like, it's beautiful to look at, and it has these undertones of just dread and death. But from a storytelling standpoint, there's so much there that it's kind of hard to look at that and say, okay, you're never going to not have something to do in this game, and the things that you do are always meaningful and interesting. That's not to say it's perfect. Combat can be a little clunky, and it started off a little buggy, but has gotten better since. So yeah, my pick would be The Witcher 3.
I think that's pretty fair.
Say Metal Gear Solid.
Yeah. No, honestly, Metal Gear Solid has a lot of things in common with The Witcher 3 in the sense that it's a really big, expansive game. There's a lot of things to do. It's not the same kind of game, but it really pushed things forward. But me talking about Metal Gear could be its own podcast, so we're going to skip that. The Witcher 3, though, it's a really, like you said, it's a game that you still hear about as if it just came out like a couple weeks or a couple months ago. You know, people still talk about it constantly, about it being like one of the greatest games. Like, I think I'm pretty sure it won Game of the Year awards like years that it, other than 2015. Like, it's just constantly heralded as one of the greatest games. Ori I spent some time with, and not a whole lot, but I really like Ori. Didn't grab me, and I know I've explained this to both of you guys. I'm very, very specific with my Metroidvanias. Like, there's very few that I really like, and a lot of games, especially ones like that, being someone who, like you guys, doesn't have a lot of time to spend on games that he doesn't like. If it doesn't grab me very quickly, I'm not going to put that kind of time into the game. And there are so many other games like it. I think that Ori wins out in the sense of its aesthetic, because it's one of it's a beautiful game. It's just incredibly pretty. The art style is great. I know it's pretty depressing in its own right, but The Witcher 3 propelled games forward in a different way. It did a lot of things for the industry. It really showed that, like, hey, games can look like this. Games can almost be their own, living world. You can find a ton of things. They don't have to be so linear, or they can be linear with 100 different paths that you can take off of and then come back to your main story. There are a lot of times where I hear people saying, like, I forgot I was even playing the main quest because I did so many other side quests. It's a different kind of game. It's in a different category, than a lot of other games. I think it's almost unfair to put other games up against it, because CD Projekt Red was just kind of like, we're just going to put every ounce of resources that we have into this for months and months and months and months and months. The same thing that they did with Cyberpunk. And it's almost a different category of game. It's not fair to go up against it, but it's still a game. I think it wins out.
Yes, and I'm sure once CD Projekt Red needs to make amends to their fan base after the botched Cyberpunk launch, they're probably going to remaster The Witcher 3 as quickly as possible to remind people of what they're capable of. Okay, so that takes us to 2016. I already lost track of who's judging who now.
I think I'm judging this one.
Okay, yes, that sounds right. Perfect. All right, so we're going to lead off 2016, two-way tie for the top spot between Uncharted 4, A Thief's End, and Inside, indie game. Number 3 is Out of the Park Baseball 17, which I never heard of, but I didn't want to skip it out of respect, so that's there. Overwatch, Forza Horizon 3, a clear-cut favorite, Steven's Sausage Roll. Again, not wanting to gloss over anything here. NBA 2K17, Dark Souls 3, Axiom Verge, there's Titanfall 2, Stardew Valley, and Battlefield 1.
Who's starting?
Well, I figured you just went on a tear, so I'll take first. Interesting. Okay, so I'm gonna again. Man, this is a tough one because I'm not in the big racing games. I tried Overwatch and it really wasn't my cup of tea. Like if I had to pick a game that I probably would never play ever again in my life, but knew the impact that it made to the gaming community, then I'd go with Overwatch. But I don't know if like, it's not my personal one. So I don't, okay. Yeah, I'm going to do that thing I do where I pick something that I think is representative of where gaming was at the time and where it's progressed to since then. So I am going to say Overwatch. I think that put competitive shooters in the spotlight. I think it put it elevated class-based multiplayer shooters. My only previous experience was Team Fortress 2. It kind of like took those classes and said, nope, where everyone's going to be a little bit different this time around, and everyone's got their own purpose, and you just can't run and shoot. So there was actually some like team-based strategy that needed to take place. I thought the maps were interesting, and some of the game modes were interesting as well. I can't say much more than that because I haven't put a lot of time into it. My personal choice for me out of that year probably would have been Uncharted or Stardew Valley, but the Uncharted series as a whole, the fourth one was good, but it also felt like it was unnecessary. They could have stopped at 3 and I would have been fine. So I enjoyed Uncharted 4 a lot, but I think in the pantheon of gaming that year, I think it would be Overwatch. I know that's a very unconvincing selection. So really, Joe, you got a chance here to blow the doors open on this one.
So, all right, I think you might be surprised here. So, I mean, Doom 2016 is very easily the best game to happen that year.
I didn't even get to on the list. I wonder why that is.
I don't know, but I had to make sure it got mentioned. It's so much fun. The start of that game, just you being like chained down and ripping your chains off and grabbing someone, it's so good. The game is just a load of fun. It's challenging, but not super difficult, so you never get stuck anywhere for too long. Like I had me playing shooters for years, but still sucking at them. Didn't really get stuck anywhere for too long. The weapons are fun. It's a great game. I think it only edges out Titanfall 2 by a couple of points, like maybe 2 points. Like Titanfall 2 is also an outrageously incredible game. My favorite thing about that is hearing that people say the same thing that I say, which is I'm so bad at this game and I never ever win in multiplayer, but it's so much fun I keep playing anyway. Because it's the people who are good at Titanfall 2 are really, really good, and it's just you just die repeatedly, but it's fun. So those are like my 2 favorite games. But to be honest, I'm not gonna argue with you, Tom. Overwatch is the most important game to come out this specific year.
So, is that your official vote there?
It's not my favorite, and I wish it wasn't. But like that's going to be the actual game of the year.
Wow. All right, Kevin. So you get a chance to either agree, or if you want to upend the script and say you guys tied, so that counts as 1 vote and your vote counts as 1.1, you can edge us out. We'll give a tie, can be decided by a brand new entry.
No, I'm in agreement with Overwatch because of, like, Tom, you said everything pretty well. Like the effect that game had on gaming and just especially like gaming communities was very impactful. So I would say Overwatch game of the year for 2016 as well.
Yes, and that's why I also made sure to kind of my 2 other favorites in there. Of course, I want to mention. So I'm not I'm not going to be selfish and say Stardew Valley is the game of the year. I can recognize what Overwatch brought. So now that we're moving on to 2017, this is when things start to get interesting. Mainly because fresh in our minds, or there's still things that we're pumping hundreds of hours into today. So I'm happy to get to be the judge here. Oh man, some other really good games. Jeez. Okay. But let's the first 2 out of the way. This is 2 big back-to-back heavy hitters. I think it's the only time in the last decade that we've seen Nintendo at the top of the list here twice. Number 1, The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild, followed with a tied score, Super Mario Odyssey, Divinity Original Sin 2, Persona 5, What Remains of Edith Finch, Making sure I'm not getting the duplicates here. Oh, and then we take a pretty small drop off after we get some re-releases and PC ports. F1 Racing 2017, Final Fantasy 14 Stormblood. Ooh, here we go. Horizon Zero Dawn, Wolfenstein 2, The New Colossus, Cuphead. And, well, I'm really going down the list here to find something that's not a port. Wow. All right, we'll throw this one there as the last one. Resident Evil 7. So there's quite a bit of stuff there.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know where Kevin's going. I don't know where Joe might go, but I think Joe...
Also, I do want to add that one of the biggest games for me that released that year, while not my game of the year, just a game I enjoyed immensely, is Splatoon 2, and I still jump into that occasionally.
Oh yeah, that was a really big year for Nintendo as a whole. Their launch year for the Switch, right? 2016. Right. That was when they were like, "Hey, we're going to put out a big like flagship game every month," and they kind of stuck true to that, which was great. Because I don't think anyone ever believed that they're going to start the year with Zelda and then, you know, mid to end of the year go to Mario, but they did it. So, Kevin, why don't you wax poetic about your choice?
I'm going to say Breath of the Wild, and I don't even know how to wax poetically about that game. That game, as somebody who has played as of now, every single Legend of Zelda game in some form of capacity, and yes, I did dabble in the CDI games because my uncle had them when I was a kid.
Whoa!
And they are horrible.
I'm jealous.
I want to
say, no, you do not want to play them.
No, I do. We all do.
Perspective, they're horrible.
Going. Let's do it. Call your uncle up.
So those things are actually, you know what? I have them somewhere in this house. But anyway, I have to find it.
Here.
I have to find it. We'll have to like talk about that another day. I may have everything actually. So Breath of the Wild, like I don't have to go on about that. Unless you've been living under a rock, everybody knows why that game's huge. It totally flipped the Zelda formula on its head, as far as like it was not linear. You could explore everything. Pretty much explore everything. It was huge, and like for me, that was the first open world game I had ever played. I don't remember if I talked to you guys about it, but when I started that game, I had like anxiety. I was like, I'm never gonna finish this game. I'm never gonna find everything. But then I just said, you know what? Forget about that. Just have fun and play it. And boy, did I. I think I have. What did I have? Over 300 hours? I forget. Something like that. But I want to go back and play Master Mode. I haven't even touched Master Mode yet, but I have to find the time to do that. But that game is incredible. The story was different, the way they implemented it. That didn't bother me too much, but just the whole like you can explore everything, you can go wherever you want, you could do it in whatever order you want. Like that was huge for the Zelda franchise, and just the game was incredible. It is incredible, not that it was. And then the art style, I feel like they found an art style that they could keep using, because that art style is like perfect to me. So
all right,
I don't have anything else to say right now about it.
Joe, you want to follow that up?
Oh, I mean, there's a few games on this list that like I wanted to play and just never did. Like I really wanted to play Cuphead. I really wanted to play Horizon and haven't yet. Horizon's now on PC, so I'm like waiting for a price drop and also for some of the fixes because I heard it was kind of glitchy. That being said, I think it's very easy to narrow this down to Mario and Zelda. Other than Fortnite, though, I mean, I don't like Fortnite. I'm not a Fortnite player.
I'm glad I made that other list separate of this one, because Fortnite, yeah, did jump out at that time, right?
Yeah, and Fortnite would win for the same reason as Overwatch, just being a huge game with a lot of staying power. But I mean,
good point.
Breath of the Wild almost has the staying power that Fortnite does to some extent. Like, obviously, the amount of people playing now is not as big as Fortnite, but people are still playing Breath of the Wild. Like, I've beaten the game, and I don't have all the Korok seeds, but I've, other than that, almost 100% of the game. And sometimes I go in and just go, I hope there's something for me to do somewhere, because I just miss being in this world. I think the only thing that could put Mario above Zelda is that Zelda was missing some things from the Zelda formula.
Like music.
I liked the music. It definitely didn't have the big crescendos that the other one had. But I think that played to the tone of the game, and I liked the very quiet, like when you're running around and all you hear is the wind and then one piano note and then back to the wind. I really enjoy that. But I know a lot of people complained about the dungeons missing, and I really didn't have a problem with it missing dungeons. I feel it was more of we were missing what could have been. Like, I didn't care that the dungeons weren't the dungeons weren't there, but if they were there, they probably would have been really awesome. But Mario had everything from the formula plus innovation. Zelda was missing, like the enemy selection was very slim. There could have been more, a much higher variation of enemies that were in other Zelda games but weren't here. So it was a great game. It's one of my favorites. Very obviously, the aesthetic and the atmosphere is there. The story is there. It's a lot of fun. Being that big open world is perfect for a Zelda game. That really helps, stop it from being broken up, which is something that you don't want in that kind of game. I do think that Mario does actually make me not liking it as much, but Mario does actually make a better game because it has everything from the formula plus the innovation. And just for the sake of bringing in an argument, I'm going to pick Mario over Zelda.
I knew he was going in there. I was like, I knew it.
Okay, all right, that's fair. And so here's the thing. In regards to Fortnite specifically, as I was just doing some hot research, it did technically come out in 2017. It was actually a paid early access game. It didn't really start to hit prominence until like 2018, I would say, was when it really picked up steam. And I'm not going to go through too much here. There's a nice article on Engadget about the rise of that. But I think 2018 was its year. The problem with a list like this is if it didn't come out in 2018, we might not pick it for 2018. Okay, so I'm going to go with Breath of the Wild, The Legend of Zelda, smiley face. I'm not going to rehash on anything that anyone said in interest of time. I think that game is a game that I was, just like Kevin, not scared of or anxious about. I don't typically like open world games, so the fact that I was able to seamlessly play that in its entirety. Now my playthrough is just about 125 hours, which for a Legend of Zelda that's lean. Like, that is I got to the end and I did the DLC and I'm done. People are spending hundreds of hours in that game. Mario's a game that I beat and told myself, cool, now I can go back and do the extra world that showed up and go try and find all the moons. And I have not played it since. Breath of the Wild is a game that anytime someone starts talking about, I want to stop what I'm doing right then and there and go play it. It's a tough game to replay for me because once it's done and there's so much to kind of aimlessly do that I don't have a lot of focus. So it's hard for me to go back and revisit, but the appeal of that is just so amazing. So I'm going to go with that one. Yep. Okay. Now, all right. Oh man, there's so many games in 2018. We're moving on to 2018 here. I'll be the judge for Kevin and Joe. Oh wait, no, I was just the judge.
It's Joe's turn to judge, I think.
Track. I need like a little dealer chip to move around. Okay, here's the list for 2018. Red Dead Redemption 2 topped the charts score-wise, followed by God of War, Celeste, Super Smash Brothers Ultimate, Forza Horizon 4, Bayonetta 2, Sonic Mania Plus, Dead Cells, Near Automata.
Hanma, I think.
I'm not sure how to say it. Sorry. Monster Hunter World. A lot of ports of stuff. Tetris Effect. Return of the Obra Dinn. And then a lot of duplicates down here. So we're going to end our list there. I've got a lot of dogs in this fight, so I know where I would lean, but let's turn it over to Kevin.
Okay, so I have to pick between, for me personally, Super Smash Brothers Ultimate, Celeste, Sonic Mania, and Dead Cells.
Wow, okay. Quite the smatter, but a lot of similarities there.
And I already know out of that, I can narrow it down to two. Smash, Ultimate, and Celeste. Now, I will say I am a huge Super Smash Brothers fan, and I love Super Smash Brothers Ultimate, but Celeste is amazing. I recommend that game to anybody, and that game is incredible. It is still a game that I want to go back and completely finish, but just the developers of that game did an amazing job. The gameplay is so precise. The story is interesting, but that is a game you don't even have to pay attention to the story because the gameplay is very good.
Strong beg to differ, but go on.
Well, I'm saying you could enjoy the game play and without the story. That's what I mean. I personally like the story, but I know some people that have skipped it and they still love the game. So I want to say Celeste. Also, the music on that game is incredible.
Yeah, I've got 2 of the soundtracks on vinyl, and they're fantastic. Okay, Joe, throw your hat into the ring. What do we got?
So this is another year that I didn't play a lot of these games. So, I mean, I played Super Smash Brothers, and I
just real quick to cut you off. So Borderlands we did for 2013. Metal Gear Solid was 2000. You basically have not played a new game since 2015 is what you're saying.
It's a good possibility. No, we're just going off of the ones that are listed here. But no, you're pretty much right. No, I mean, I played Super Smash Brothers, and I like Super Smash Brothers, and I think it's genuinely a good game. Maybe it just didn't grab me for some reason. I also the whole board game style thing. I didn't like it. So,
World of Light.
That's it. So yeah. I'm gonna go off of the one that. So I also played Sonic Mania, which it's a Sonic game, like a good one, and it's enjoyable. But I guess Sonic's like Mega Man. It just it gets very hard very quickly and very confusing. So I'm gonna go off of the one that to me I hear of the most and think still has the most staying power. I think the biggest actual release of the year is somewhere between Super Smash Brothers and Red Dead Redemption. People really wanted Red Dead Redemption 2. It was a big deal that it was finally coming, and then when the PC port was coming, it was a big deal. But that died very quickly. The game that I still hear about the most and that most people talk about is Dead Cells.
Oh.
I was not expecting you to say that.
That one, to me, sounds like it has the most staying power. I know I've said this about a couple games in other years, but it almost sounds like it had come out recently with the amount of people that I still hear talking about it, as opposed to Red Dead that I don't hear about at all.
They've also, I will say this about Dead Cells on the Switch. I guess I get the news alerts for that game. They have added content, not on a fixed schedule, but it's every so often it's oh, we fixed this and we added this. Oh, here's another thing we added. Here's another thing we added. So
the game's also beautiful. It's the art style is gorgeous.
Yeah. Fluidity of movement in that game is spectacular. Just feels really good and fun to play. Okay, interesting choice. I did not think you were going to go with that. All right, well, that actually makes my decision a little bit easier then. We don't have a tie, so I can't interject my own opinion. for reference, this was the first time that Level 30 Games has done a end of the year top 5 video. Celeste came in at number 2 on my list. It was the runner-up. I personally had picked God of War for my game of the year that year. I thought from a technical achievement, it was outstanding. Music, gameplay, all fantastic. The story was incredible. The performances were great. That game is freaking awesome. Which also means I tipped my hand to leaning towards Kevin and saying Celeste was a really close second there. And as I mentioned in my top 5 review, that game came out in January of that year, which is just incredible that it was able to hold people's attention or retention with its significance over the course of that year and maintain game of the year contention for 12 months instead of like the last 3. Red Dead Redemption 2, I played for about 5 or 6 hours and was bored out of my mind. I did not like that game. It's just too slow paced and too methodical for me. Never really got into it. So God of War would be my personal one. I think between the two, however, and I did put a ton of hours into both Dead Cells and Celeste. It's got to be Celeste for me. Gameplay's tight. The level variety is really interesting. The music's fantastic. And I thought the story was beautiful. Really deals with a lot of deeper issues that are deals with depression, identity, and things like that. And I read a beautiful article not too long ago that one of the artists kind of came out and apparently that game is really big or makes a lot of waves in the LGBTQ community, because there were theories about the character, this, that, and the other, and I don't want to misspeak and say the writer of that game, but one of the people behind the creation of that game kind of nonchalantly came out and said, no, Madeline, who's the main character, she is trans, or they are trans. And that's how I wrote that character. So that's how they are. And it's never addressed in the game and it's never part of the story. But I think the background to that story is so incredibly interesting and fascinating. And is really hopefully indicative of where we are as a culture change in accepting all different types of people. And so on top of being a really great game, I think that was a really great stepping stone for inclusivity in games as well. So Celeste is going to get my vote between the two. Dun, 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 dun. All right, 2019. I know we're up against, we can move a little quicker as these games are a little bit more fresh in our minds, of course. And then we'll take a look back at our quick list here. So in 2019, skipping some ports and such, Resident Evil 2, Dragon Quest 11, Sekiro: Shadows Die Twice, Disco Elysium, a lot of definitive editions or DLCs: Devil May Cry 5, Slay the Spire, Fire Emblem 3 Houses, Apex Legends, Super Mario Maker 2, Astral Chain, and I'm going to stop the list there as we're getting far down.
Games in there.
Yeah. All right. Joe is the judge. Kevin and me are going to pick our games.
I didn't play any of those games yet. I have Astral Chain sitting on my shelf unopened. I do want to play that. I'm looking over the list again real quick because I made some notes. I kind of want to lean with Fire Emblem 3 Houses because that brought Fire Emblem back onto I'm going to say home console. We all know the Switch is a hybrid, but it was talked about a lot as bringing Fire Emblem to a more powerful console, I guess I could say, than the handheld DS lines. But that game, like Tom, you spoke about that game a lot, and I also read about it and watched some people discuss it online. Like, it just had a very big impact for the franchise and really brought more people into Fire Emblem. And out of that list, I would pick that as the game of that year.
So it was incidentally my game of the year that year as well, with a very close second going to Dragon Quest XI, which it was a fantastic game. That was a really tough decision, but yeah, Fire Emblem is my pick as well. I actually just restarted another playthrough. I think that game obviously has 3 houses, meaning you can get 3 different playthroughs with 3 different story elements and perspectives, and that makes it really, really interesting. But yeah, I think that game kind of elevated Fire Emblem as a series. I'm not saying it brought it back into the limelight. Fire Emblem Awakening for the 3DS was like the last game. At the time, they basically had said, short story, hey, you can make this Fire Emblem game, but if this one doesn't sell as well as it should or we want it to, we're going to basically kill the franchise. And that game was so well received that people gave it a shot and they said, oh, this is what Fire Emblem is about? Cool, we can get on board with this. And that spawned, as everyone knows, in the Nintendo realm, the last few years, we've been inundated with Fire Emblem stuff. And part of that is because of the success of that game. 3 Houses, I think, while a little rough around the edges, maybe graphically, it's just awesome to get like voiceover lines for every character. The story's interesting. There's twists and turns, and tactical gameplay for me is just really, really cool and enjoyable. So this is going to put Joe in an interesting spot now, as Kevin and I have agreed on a game. He can either agree with us or he can add his own into the ring and push it for the game of 2019. Joseph, a lot of responsibility in your hands.
I like your rules. They sound like the worst, just the worst game show I've ever been a part of.
Hey, we're lucky there's not 4 of us because we can't have any ties here. So,
oh, no, you're right. So, I mean, I'm inclined to agree with you guys. Like there are other games on the list, like Sekiro and Control. Both also have a lot of staying power. Sekiro was a really big release. Control is still releasing and still doing updates and still seems to be like a big deal game. That said, supposedly it runs like garbage on everything. Like there's just,
it really does. And it's not unplayable, but it there are moments where it really chugs and it stutters, and like even when you go to the menu to equip something different, like you're waiting a small chunk of time to get back into the game.
Yeah, there's a lot of talk of it like dipping below 30 frames per second, which is just embarrassing. And I mean, don't get me wrong, if the game's optimized and it's still not able to do it, then they just put too much into the game, you know, and so it shouldn't be an embarrassment in that sense that they put a lot of resources into it. It sucks that it doesn't run well when it should be a good game. That's it. I'm kind of inclined to agree with you guys. I'm not going to argue with it about Fire Emblem. It was well received from pretty much everybody. I heard very few bad things about it that weren't like standard gripes with most games. As someone who was unhappy mostly with one of the other big releases, which was Pokemon, I'm going to let you guys have Fire Emblem.
Yeah, that's true. And Pokemon, yeah, I forgot that came out that year. Yep. And maybe that's why, because it was fairly forgettable. I don't think I even finished it. I think I got to the last match and I was like, nah, it's not even worth it. It's a bummer too. All right, so that takes us to 2020. I don't know what to do here. We all know where we stand because we talked about this in part 1 of our podcast. But here's the quick list. We'll move through them. Persona 5 Royal, which I will include, even though it does include Persona 5, as there was a pretty substantial addition to that game where it's a little bit different than DLC, as it's not like, oh, you can continue on, here's another chapter. It's here's another character and a story, and it's woven into the original story. Unfortunately, that means I didn't play it because that game literally took me over a year to beat. It was 100 and some hours. The Last of Us Part 2, Hades, Half-Life Alyx, Ori and the Will of the Wisps, Demon Souls, Microsoft Flight Simulator, Crusader Kings 3, Animal Crossing New Horizons, Formula 1 2020, Splunky 2, I guess somehow Cyberpunk 2077 makes it onto that list. I mean, we can keep going. A lot of these games are fresh in our minds from this year, but we'll stop that list there. And if there's nothing I didn't mention, if there's something that you're just like, no, I played this and I'm good, then Cool. I don't know who we put as judge here because obviously I'm going to go with my gut and my heart.
I already know what you're putting, Tom.
The Last of Us Part 2, zero explanation. That's it. That's my vote.
I did not play any of these games on that list you just mentioned yet. I do have Ori Will of the Wisps. It's on my list, and I do want to get Hades because the more I've seen about that. But if I had to say, as far as a game this year that had a major impact, and I would have to agree with you, Tom, on The Last of Us Part 2 as being the game of the year.
Joe, what are your thoughts as a whole?
I mean, to be honest, I want to play Half-Life more than anything. I just don't have a VR headset. And that's such a bummer. Like, that's another game that I heard nothing but good things about. It just looks so good, and it does what Half-Life was supposed to do, which was be innovative. So I would really, really like to play Half-Life, but I haven't, so I can't vote for it. So I'm going to have to, back up what I said before and just say Doom Eternal. It evolved on what was already a good game, added more good things to it, and is generally, other than being painfully difficult, I really I only have one major gripe with the game, and it doesn't bother most of the other people, so I'm just gonna let it go. So I really enjoyed Doom.
Okay, so we'll include both of those on the list because now that we have our list, and we'll rank the games that we picked from 2010 on. These were our number one selections. Take a second. All right, Joe and Kevin. We want to try and land on game of the decade, which is going to be a really difficult thing to do, as there's some great things here. And even the ones from, 10 years ago, I think we did well in selecting games that would hold up really good today. But I think maybe we look at 10 years and say, okay, what if we had to summarize this decade in gaming? What's the epitome of gaming? What would we want, to put in that time capsule again for someone to look at in 100 years? To say,
I want to put a disclaimer on this
what,
and say that with this list, it's not necessarily, and what we pick in the end, not necessarily our favorite game. It is the defining game.
yes.
Right.
And it's either way, it's still a tough decision. Okay, so to run through that list again: Mass Effect 2, Portal 2, Far Cry 3, A Link Between Worlds, Legend of Zelda: A Link Between Worlds, Shovel Knight, The Witcher 3, Overwatch, Legend of Zelda: Breath of the Wild. Hey, it's the only series to be on there twice. Celeste, Fire Emblem: Three Houses, and then the two from this year: The Last of Us Part 2 and Doom Eternal. Man, okay. Game of the year, or game of the decade, sorry. This is a tough one.
So level 30 official game of the decade.
Yes, I just want everyone to know that the level 30 does have the official say, so all media outlets will be deferring to us for selections. Thank everyone for listening to this podcast so far, and every podcast that we've put out. This make or break right after this. People are going to.
How are we quantifying this?
I don't. How do you quantify any game over another one? I mean, even 2020, we've got a narrative-driven action-adventure game with a first-person shooter, where the main objective is to just blow the shit out of everything, right? Like, how can we arguably say one is better than the other? But I think better is the word we want to not think about. It's
right. Yeah.
It's representative or indicative of gaming as a whole within the last 10 years. What would we pick? This is not an easy decision.
Do we want to call it the most important game over the last 10 years?
Or most impactful? I don't know.
Because I think important and impactful also change the objective here. I think simply titling it Game of the Decade kind of opens it to interpretation. And I think it should still then, it should be a good game, of course, but I think everything here is. I think it should be impactful. I think it should be whatever other word Joe said, I can't remember.
All right. Can I go first? Because I made my decision out of the 10. Well, 11 games you have listed here.
Yeah, no, if you're ready, go for it. Because I feel like I need time to ponder this.
Right?
Yeah, and I can't, like I narrowed it down to 4, and now I think I know my 1. And it would be The Legend of Zelda: Breath of the Wild. I'm not gonna rehash the same points over and over again that have been said about the game so far, but like as someone who grew up with the Legend of Zelda franchise, and I pretty much played almost every single game when they came out. So like that's what I mean when I grew up with it. That game just changed so much, and like I said earlier, it was the first open world game I had ever played, and I did have a few. Like I just feel like that game showed how not just Nintendo as a developer, but like the industry, like as how the industry can move forward and innovate and change video games. I just really feel like that game, for me, is the game of the decade, and the list we have is huge here, and it is hard to pick. But that, for me, I would have to say The Legend of Zelda: Breath of the Wild.
Okay, all right.
That's it for me. Like if I'm picking one, that's mine.
Joe, are you any closer to landing on something here? Because
I took a bunch of games out. So since Kevin has his mind made up, do you want me to give you my truncated list and maybe we can work it out between the two of us?
let's see what you have left.
Okay, so here's my truncated list. Mass Effect, The Witcher 3,
Yes, okay.
Overwatch, Breath of the Wild, and The Last of Us Part 2.
Okay, a good starting ground. All right, so let's work together, Joe. Not we land on the same thing, but I think so far I can agree with the removal of Far Cry 3, Link Between Worlds, and Shovel Knight.
Okay.
I think I'd even be okay removing Fire Emblem Three Houses and Doom Eternal, which would leave. And maybe it's my bias. I would remove Overwatch because I never really put that much time into it outside of a couple hours. And for me, that wasn't a big deal. But I also think a team-based competitive shooter doesn't really represent the decade that much, or does it? Because now, I mean, with esports, with Twitch, with I guess you can't really exclude that. Okay.
That's why I left Overwatch on there, because this is when esports really took off. And Overwatch is like a defining game of that.
Yeah, and so is Fortnite, and so is Apex, and we didn't have those on there. So is Fall Guys, so is Among Us. I mean, geez. All right, so full disclosure for me, when I initially took a look at this at just a smattering of games year to year, I had almost instinctually put The Witcher 3.
Okay.
But that's not to say I'm not wavering on that, because I would also lean towards Breath of the Wild. Between those, I don't know, man. And then you throw The Last of Us 2 in there. I just, those would be my top 3. If those are my 3, I'm going to say The Witcher 3, Breath of the Wild, Last of Us.
Okay.
But I don't know if I can narrow anything down from there. I don't know if that helps you out at all. But Kevin, all right, Kevin, let's just call a spade here. Kevin, who was late to our podcast recording session,
was prepared.
Sometimes wavering on his commitment to these recording sessions, was able to land on a game very succinctly. And for that, I applaud and respect you, Kevin. Thank you. All right, so I might be down in the top 3 here. Joe, are you any closer here?
So I think at least with The Witcher and Breath of the Wild, I think they're very similar. So I think if you take either one of them out, I mean, they're I don't think they're the same game by any means. I think what they're representing is very similar. They're both fantasy style games. They're both very open world, both with a lot of side quests. I think there's a lot of overlap between the games. I think removing either of those almost wouldn't change the final outcome of of this being somewhat representative of the decade. It still shows what the industry is doing and what the industry is moving towards. The Last of Us is also very similar, but I don't know if there's as many side quests in The Last of Us. I think it's a lot more linear.
Okay, so here's my rationale for eliminating The Last of Us. As I just thought of this when you were talking. If I'm going to recommend a game, I don't know if The Last of Us Part 2 is a game that I would recommend to everybody. And that's not to say that one of these selections has to be universally enjoyed by all. If I were to sit down and play The Last of Us 2 with my mom in the room, she might be captivated by that story. I don't think she would play it on her own. I don't think a non-gamer would look at The Last of Us Part 2 and say, this is a game for me. Like, it feels like the story's incredible. And I've waxed poetic on this game for a long time. But at the same time, it feels very much, that is a gamer's game. Right. I don't think people on the fringe of hardcore gamers might be into that. I don't know. I could be wrong, but I feel like I feel like a lot of people are going to be turned off by that, and I think that would remove it from my selection.
Okay, I actually don't disagree with you saying that it's a gamer's game.
Again, that doesn't mean it's bad. And it sold like 4 million copies its first month or something, some obscure number like that. So like clearly people wanted to play this game. I just don't think the same people that are playing, Fire Emblem or I don't know. I don't know.
No, I agree, and I know exactly what you're saying. There's some games that like I love this game. I wouldn't recommend this game to other people. I enjoy this game.
But at the same time, like if I'm talking with you, like I listen, I will lend you my PlayStation 4 so you can play this game. But I know what kind of gamer you are. I know that you take the medium seriously. I know that you engage in video games much more than, hey, let me pass the time or do something fun. You know what I mean? Like in that sense, I would recommend this to a very select group of people. So I can still stand by my original line of I wouldn't recommend it to everyone, but I would recommend it to everyone that loves games as much as we do. Okay.
Yes. If we're going to go with that, and I don't think that's the wrong path to take, then I hate to say it, I'm going to agree with Kevin and say it's going to be Breath of the Wild, because I think that Breath of the Wild has, I think it's easier for more people to get into, whether you're a hardcore gamer or whether you're a casual gamer. I know a lot more people who don't play a whole lot of video games and still want to play Breath of the Wild. I think it's easier to follow along with the story. Not to say that the story is simplistic, and it might have something to do with the fact that Zelda's a bit more ubiquitous than the Witcher series is. But I think it's easier to follow that story along, to have fun with the characters and not get lost in all of the side quests and get too distracted. So I think Breath of the Wild might be more accessible than The Witcher is, while still representing what the industry is doing.
Okay, as I'm getting a phone call in the middle of this.
Silent.
Right. So something you said triggered me. Okay, I need you to stop doing that. I'm going to murder this person because now I have to edit this.
Leave it in. It's 2020.
Okay. So if now we're between, the lighting changed.
It's getting too dark in here, so I had to turn the light on.
All right. So, all right. Between these two games, here's where I think I stand. I think The Witcher 3 has the better story. I think that it's more focused. I think you're able to say to yourself, okay, I'm doing this because the main character, Geralt, is, here's his motivation, here's his rationale, here's what he's trying to overcome, to look for, to solve, whatever. And I think as a gamer, that drives you a little bit more and tethers you more to that character's journey. And not to mention the open world is beautiful and there's tons of stuff to do. But what I loved about Breath of the Wild is that the story was there, and it was a skeleton story at best. Nothing we haven't seen before in a Zelda game. In fact, substantially less than what we've seen before in a Zelda game. I feel like, however, that game was not about Link's journey as much as it was about my journey, me specifically. Link has always been symbolic of tethering the character in the game to the person behind the controller.
Hence his name.
Which is why the character's named Link.
Yeah.
That adventure that I took in Breath of the Wild and you took in Breath of the Wild was ultimately the same in that we experienced the same story beats and the boss battles were the same. However, our process in getting there was vastly different. And in a way that for me, 100 plus hours, and for Kevin, 10,000 plus hours or whatever he's at.
More hours than Tom.
That's a personal journey that, while a narratively focused game, getting you to story beats will probably have stronger story beats. I think there's something really special about saying, here's a world, go. And really, to some extent, leaving it at that. And for me, I think that makes that game way more poetic and personalized than anything else on this list. I mean, even with The Last of Us, I was attached to these characters because of the story presented to me in a really profound and meaningful way, and it challenged my way of thinking. But never at any point in time in that game was I ever completing my journey. I was completing their journey. And I still think that's a beautiful thing to have that connection. But to have it in a way where Breath of the Wild made it as personal as it did, I think is really hard to overlook. And I think it really separates really every other game on this list.
I want to add something that I just remembered from my playthrough of Breath of the Wild. That was it made me, the release of that game and like starting that game made me think of, like, I took notes as I played that game. Like, I didn't look online for anything because I didn't want any spoilers. So like, I had a notepad and I still have it with like, oh, there's this weird thing there. Oh, there's this spot in this area, blah, blah, blah. Like, I had like pages of notes that I would flip through. And like, I talked to other people about that game so much who are also playing it. Like, yo, did you see this thing yet? Like, where are you in the game? And like, just the conversations I had with friends who were playing that game at the time, like, it just had a different effect than other games that I had played. Like, I talked to, there was a group of 4 of us that we would talk a lot about things in that game, and just, I had not done anything like that with a game in, I don't know, maybe ever. Like,
yeah, I mean, and I saw one of the things I actually contemplated doing was that, when they came out with the update that included like the Traveler's Path, like it actually showed you the places where you traveled in like real time. That you can speed it up, and it showed you where you died and all the other stuff. Like I heard of people printing out their map at the end as like, hey, this is the map of Hyrule, but here's exactly how I moved through this, and here's where I died. And you kind of have all these memories of your experience with that game. I think that's insane. And I think it's also a game where if in 100 years you put you dust off a Switch and you give it to a kid and say, play this game, I think they'll figure it out immediately. I think it's immediately accessible in a way that things on here other games on here might not be. So that took a while to get to, and I was really scared of where I was going to end up. But listen, I think the difficulty in a list like this just really, hopefully, as a whole, as we wrap up our part 2 episode today, is just be appreciative of all this stuff that we get to play and experience year to year. I mean, we took an hour to recap 10 years of games and landed on some really, really monumental and meaningful stuff. And that's not going to go away. The games industry is huge. We're going to have stuff like this every year. But it's always good to kind of reflect back and take a look at what was special to you or meant a lot, or, you know, as folks like us who are into the game industry as a whole, what was monumental to the industry. And so, Kevin and Joe, thank you for taking this journey with us as Level 30 Games can officially declare that the game of the decade from 2010 to 2020, The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild. That's pretty freaking cool. So that was a journey, folks. Thank you both for being here today to do this. If you've listened with us along for this hour, thank you so much. Maybe we dug up some stories about these games that you had, you know, 7, 9, 10 years ago. And if we forgot anything on this list, let us know. Leave us a comment, shoot us a reply. We would love to hear, big oversights. And then, of course, we can revisit this next episode and dabble forever on what will ultimately be an ever-changing list, I'm sure. But this was really great and really special. So thank you, guys.
Thanks for having us, Tom.
Yeah, thanks, Tom. Bringing us together at the end of the year here.
Yeah. All right. So that's going to do it for this episode of the Level 30 Games podcast. Thanks once again to Kevin and Joe for joining us. My name is Tom. We hope you enjoyed us on this journey. Make sure that you check out our other offerings on YouTube. We got some Let's Plays. We got some old school Let's Plays with Press Start, video game reviews, of course, our podcasts, and a whole lot more. We're looking forward to bringing you a ton of new stuff in 2021. Hope you had a great holiday. Have a happy new year. Kevin and Joe, any salutations or sign-offs for you folks?
I'm watching Kevin's face.
I don't know. Keep on gaming. Enjoy the games that have came out this winter season, and we'll see everybody next year in 2021.
Heck yeah.
Yeah, hopefully if things start to get better over the next year, we'll have some cooler game releases and we'll have a lot more to play, and maybe I'll actually play a game that releases next year.
Oh, heard it here first, folks. We're going to hold Joe to that commitment. All right, that'll do it for all of us. We hope you have a wonderful new year. Best of luck to everyone in 2021. Stay happy, stay healthy, and we'll see you in the next episode. Adios, everybody.
Bye, everyone.